For this week's lesson, we're going to be making our very own 3D building set. Now, I've had this set in my room for the entire year, and I love it so much. It's so colorful, it has all these different artist patterns on them, and there is no glue or cutting or anything necessary to make an endless amount of sculptures. Now, we're not going to be making ours exactly like this, but I was super inspired, and I thought that since we're at home, we have all these supplies already at our hands and at our fingertips. So what we're going to be using today is the same method of lock and notch, which I will go over in just a second, but we're going to be using cereal boxes or the cardboard from your bubbly water or sodas, and we're going to be learning how to create different shapes using the same lock and notch method. So a notch is going to be like what you see here, a little slit on the sides, even, not too big, you're not cutting this thing in half, but if it's like a square, it's going to have one on each side. The circles also have 4, similar to the square. Triangles have them in the corners. And with this method, you can do one of two things. You can line up the 2 notches together to secure them, or if you wanted it to be in a different location, you can actually just use 1 notch to secure it. Now, once you understand this lock and notch method, you can also make animals. Here's a giraffe that I've made. If this is something that interests you, I will also be putting a link to the handouts to make a giraffe, a bee, and an elephant. Now, they're a little tricky, but once you understand how to make this abstract building set, then you will, of course, be successful with this same method. Now, if you guys are ready to get started and learn how to do this, join me. For this lesson, I'm using a cereal box, Sharpie, and scissors. If you have acrylic paint at home, you could also paint your box instead. The first thing that I'm doing is covering the back of the box with different line and shape patterns. A pattern is when you repeat something multiple times. This is very similar to the art of Zentangling if you are familiar. Feel free to look at the pattern reference sheets that I have linked with here, or just make up your own. Now we're ready to cut out our shapes. We want to stick with geometric shapes, so circles, squares, triangles, rectangles. We could even create some curved like bridges, and you'll notice that on my box my Sharpie didn't really stick, so I just went ahead and started cutting away. We're going to try and use as much of the box as possible. Every shape that you cut out, you want to make sure that you've included at least 2 notches or cut slits on opposite sides. So as you're watching me cut these out, I instantly cut it out and then add the notches. That way I don't forget or get lost. As you're cutting, feel free, make up some new geometric shapes. You just want to make sure that these have some straight edges that will allow us to give a little bit more support as we layer the different shapes. Now that we have our shapes all cut out, we're ready to start assembling. Now there's really no correct way to do this. It's a lot of trial and error, figuring out which pieces will support each other so our 3D sculpture will stand on its own. Now, because we're using thinner cardboard, you're probably going to find that you want to attach 2 notches together. If you're using thicker cardboard, because that's all that you had on hand, then 1 notch will support it on its own. But for here, to make everything really stay connected, line up 2 notches. as you're constructing your piece, you're trying to find the most interesting angles. So it's really good to have some shapes coming off in one direction, off of another shape, and really building. And every so often, turn your piece and see if there's an area that could use a little bit more jazziness, a little bit more interest. Oh, one just fell over. It was too heavy, so I had to take one off. All right, keep going. So here's my finished piece. I love it. It was super fun. The cool part about this 3D building set is I can now take it all apart and make a whole new one, completely different. Now, I had mentioned that if you did have acrylic paint at home, you could always paint both sides of these in different ways, and that's gonna add a whole new interest to your project. I am so excited for you guys to try this out. Have fun with it. There's no right or wrong way to do it. And like I've mentioned, I have provided links to make different animals using the lock and notch method. Have fun.